Welcome to a Matter of Mindset podcast. I'm Joseph Carpe Diem, putting in work from the AM to the PM. You could have been anywhere in the world right now, but you're here with me. So whilst you're here, like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. And without further ado, I'm going to let my guest introduce himself.
Thank you for having me here, Joseph. My name is Alexander. I'm 22 and I run two businesses. One of them is dedicated to sports betting, which is professional services, helping people to be able to put themselves out there, bet safely, but not have to worry about the addictions and all the pitfalls that come down to it. The second side of what I do is I run a business in private coaching, which is dedicated to cognitive development, and all aspects of really just being able to work with a mind in a way that isn't necessarily common, but is necessary never to say the least.
Okay, cool. What made you want to go down that route?
Really, for me, growing up, I was always quite curious anyway. Always sort of looking around and thinking, why do people do what they do? How do they work the way that they work? Seeing some bizarre things myself, but didn't really understand where I was going to go with that. So it's always that natural inclined curiosity that then turned into as I grew, that discovery that, there's something with utility to this.
Okay. Now it's interesting because we've had like a lot of people come on the podcast, and understanding people's why I think is very important, because once you understand the why, how they think sort of makes sense. So if you could take me back to like your childhood, if you don't mind, like what was that like?
So raised in what you could class as a middle class, reasonably middle class. So did well. Weren't rich millionaires or anything like that, but we had what we needed, and we had the extra to be able to enjoy some of the fine luxuries. However, historically, the family was often a little bit dysfunctional on my father's side, and I always saw that there were certain aspects to it within people's behaviour, drama, and things like that I just didn't really understand. So it sort of stemmed from there. Sort of looking at how people behaved and thinking, wow, that seems like it's off. Why aren't people happy? Why are people arguing? I'm talking really young here. But then as I grew, I always, experienced certain social anxieties myself, right? And that also sparked this sort of wondering as, why me? Why am I experiencing this? What does it all mean? So growing up, generally sort of, like every other kid, facing certain adversities in their own rights, privileged in many other ways. However, the dysfunction, I would say, was sort of the big key part. Now, I was fortunate enough to live in a household where I have both parents, sibling as well. That isn't something that's common. However, or as common, should I say, being precise with my words here. But it's definitely important for me to understand that, in this situation, everybody has a similar sort of position in terms of how they're raised.
Yeah.
There's some sort of aspect where there may be a dysfunction in some way, and that point really made me realize that actually I'm not sort of the only one.
Yeah.
And of course, it was always that victim mindset very early on. So I'd say growing up, generally sort of pushing myself through the more creative sides of myself, a little bit different, not necessarily the popular kid. Call it divergent, whatever the other names are.
Neurodivergent,
yeah. And now coming to the point where it's a little bit more channeled, which brought me to this path, really.
Interesting. Because I was going to ask, like, I can relate to like a dysfunctional household, but not necessarily with two parents, just with one. And my question is, how would you say that dysfunction impacted you?
Well, to be able to answer that as best as possible, the dysfunction, I guess I have to cover myself. Part of it was externally across different parts of my family. So my mother's family I was always very close with, my father's family not so much. But the dysfunction mainly came from my younger sister, in which she has autism, ADHD in certain aspects, and actually borderline personality disorder.
Okay.
Now, my parents, in this case, it was growing up with, again, this sort of curiosity, always aware that there was something off with my sister. But as a parent, of course, with the purest of intent, came across in the way that, why would you say that about your sister? There's nothing wrong with her. It's being mean. And it was never me being harsh or trying to segregate her, but it was the way that I realized and almost a call for help to say there's something not right.
Yeah.
Something needs to be done. And as a result of that, with parents wanting their sort of daughter to feel accepted the same as everybody else, every other kid, without realizing that she wasn't like every other kid.
Yeah.
And the dysfunction came in where the consequences, unintended of course, of that reflected in my sister's growth,
Yeah.
which then started lots of arguments, very volatile in her
Okay.
personality, extreme, more enhanced versions of the same psychological issues any kid experiences through social media, and it poured over into the whole family.
Yeah.
So it got to that point where it's which is where we are now, saying, okay, they realise now,
Yeah.
but it could have been so much earlier, and they finally understand that was the voice
Yeah.
that was coming from me. I was trying to tell them. So early on, I would say that affected me in a way that was, although I don't really identify with that anymore, it affected me in a way that, for a period of time, not really having a voice to be heard,
Yeah.
and questioning my own evaluations of things. Was I really being this harsh, or was there something wrong?
Yeah. You know what's funny, yeah? I've got a younger brother who's autistic as well. So when you were saying some of the stuff, like, I proper relate. But I think it was me, my older sister, and my mum. But my mum passed away when I was 13. So my mum's sister, my aunt, came in to look after me and my sister and my younger brother growing up. But we kind of understood and kind of accepted that how my brother's different and that how he's going to need a bit more time and attention from us. So it wasn't really, as in regards to him, we knew that he needed attention. But I wouldn't say we felt neglected, but I would say at a young age, what we'd been through, me and my sister losing a mum, fair enough, my aunt did lose a sister as well, so I'm not going to take that away from her. But it was like, to juggle school, college, university, and attend to an autistic sibling is a lot. So I can only imagine what it was like for you as well.
It's kind of comes in different stages, really. There's a stage where you try and constantly have an input to try and diffuse or calm down a situation. And then there came the phase of, okay, I'm just going to completely detach myself from that and let it all kick off. Felt like Switzerland in World War II. You're just kind of looking down, watching it all kick off. And, nah, I'm chilling. I'm here. And I'm kicking back. But those are the sort of waves it comes in, really, where it's sort of, there's certain aspects that you try to help, and then there's certain aspects that you accept that, okay, certain things are beyond my control, and all I could do is be a better sibling.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I could have been a better sibling at times. Definitely, 100%. I think sometimes I think that just comes with being young. Like, you're very selfish and you're stuck in your own mind. So I do agree with you that being a better sibling, brother, just, it's important. But yeah, I didn't expect that, I did. Because even with you, like, I relate, like, just hearing what you said just now, like, I relate to you in a lot of ways. Like, I wasn't like not like the social kid, but I wasn't like the popular kid. I was kind of like stuck to myself. And I think when my mum passed away, I think it just went times 10.
Yeah.
Like, I was very like reclusive. Not that I wouldn't talk to people. Like, I'm a very like talkative person, but I kept everyone at arm's length. Can you relate to that?
Yeah, definitely. Now, although I haven't lost my mother, I'm fortunate still to have her. I lost a lot of the family members on my mother's side quite early, which were the people that were closest to. So then we found that definitely it becomes more isolating. I would for sure, because you've got less of those individuals who you do look to and have a good relationship around you. So you think, well, what else do I do but be with myself?
Yeah.
I could definitely understand that. And it's
I think for me, I was fortunate where, obviously, because my mum and dad separated, like, I used to go to my dad's house a lot, and obviously my dad has a stepson, so me and him got super close. So when it was a bit on top for me in my own house. I used to, like, my dad's house was like a bit of refuge for me. So me and like my stepbrother are proper close. So I'm fortunate for that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's interesting actually, because often I hear that step parents who have other siblings, they sort of have a bit of conflict because it's like, oh, there's a difference in family. You're
Yeah.
not related to me. Is that a common thing, or is that that you found? Was there ever any of that conflict?
Nah. Me and my stepbrother have never had. I don't even like calling him my stepbrother because like we're proper. Like it's literally like that. Like we're proper close. So I wouldn't even like. There's never, not even a sniff. Not even like. And I think part of the reason why that was he was not even that he was the only child, but he was like the only one from like his mum at the time. So I was kind of allowed to be a big brother to him, and there was no ego there. So I think it just helped. Like we're proper close up until now. And when did I meet him? I'm trying to remember when I met him. It was proper. He was proper young. He was like in primary school. He's like mid-20s now. Oh, so wow. Yeah. So we're proper close. There was none of that. there was actually none of that. Like we used to play football. We used to play football together. Like proper close. Yeah.
Yeah. One thing I found actually was quite funny because I used to do a lot of work with sort of couples, right? But then often you find that the kids they reflect on that, right? And I always found that couples with sort of a single child, or often I'd find that there was a woman had married a man who had a kid previously, or the other way around. It was interesting because they'd always say to me how they were worried about having another kid in case they were raised differently or with different parents, or there was a conflict there. So that's why I wondered really, and I wasn't sure if it was something common or just an anomaly. But it's cool that it's you kind of have that relationship as well with them, because it's, I suppose, when you lose a family member like a mother or something so close, confiding in your siblings is good as well. Where sure you have the period of time where you annoy the fuck out of each other. Yeah. But it's nice that you've got that network of your age as well.
Yeah. Sure. No, totally. I don't know. I think and as in, because I got like female siblings, like they'll let you know when they're annoying them. But I think when it's boys, like there's never really any of that. Like we used to, like there was none of that. I can't even explain it.
It's a different thing though because he's males.
Yeah.
So it's like there's that mutual understanding.
Yeah.
Really, as opposed to when it's women and it's sort of just that primal biological dynamic that just clashes yin and yang.
Yeah, totally. Oh yeah, I was gonna ask you, yeah. I've been getting not a lot of slack, but about men's fashion and men's sort of sense of style. If you lot are frequent the podcast, you see that I've changed up the attire. Shirt, chinos, trainers. What do you think about the state of men's fashion?
Like everything, based on social construct, at least our age especially, men's fashion has become quite tacky for me. And I'll be honest, I've been a victim of that as well. I've gone through a phase where I've worn loads of brands and Louis, Dior. I still have a few of those items, but within men's fashion, the originality is going now. Yeah. It's everybody's trying to cop the wave. I remember the wave of 95s, yeah? 95s.
Yeah, MS 95s, yeah. 110s for the Londoners, yeah.
Yeah. I remember the first kid that comes into school wearing those, everyone's like, they're hard. Where you get them from? And then the next week, everybody's wearing them. And it's a constant trend. Now, trends, of course, have been around for a period of time anyway. They always have. But because of social media, I would say they're more amplified now. Yeah. Because they're put out there into the world. So, although I like, personally, a lot of sort of modern men's fashion in terms of the blend between classic, old style, and new. Generally, overall, there's a lack of originality.
Yeah,
in short,
I agree. You know what? I was recently moving house, and I was just looking through my wardrobe, and I was just looking through some of my stuff, thinking, I'm never gonna wear you again. I'm never gonna wear you again. And I was looking at my shoes, and I'm like, the only pair of shoes that I'm proud of, that I don't think I regret buying you, was a pair of Russell and Bromley Chelsea boots that my friend got me for my birthday. Shout out, Stephen. I see you. But yeah, so I'm like, you know what? Something's got to change. Something's got to change. I said, you know what? I'm changing my whole look. I'm going for a more smart, casual look. So I said, you know what? I got to get the shoes. So got a pair of monk straps. Got a pair of Axel Arigatos because I'm tired of Air Force Ones. I know the Air Force One crew are going to kill me, but for £100+, you've got like 3 wears max. I'm not on that. I'm not on that. And I'm not getting like a hot cloth and an iron to remove my creases. I'm not on. So you know what? I retired from the Air Force Ones officially. So I said, you know what? Let me just find a pair of all white trainers that I can actually be cool with. So I said, I got these Arigatos from Selfridges. I was like, so I'm cool. Like, I'm just changing the whole look and just trying to change everything. Like, you know, when people talk about image, the first thing that people think about is clothes. Yeah. But it's not just clothes. It's obviously there's an A, B, C, D of it: appearance, behavior, communication, digital footprint.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm just trying to change everything.
See, what's your take on high-end shoes? Because I found when I was going through the whole materialistic, catching the wave stage, I hated the high-end shoes. I thought they were ugly. Now I'm on a classier kind of thing. I go for them. What's your take on them?
I think I'm with you. Personally, this is just my opinion. For a decent pair of footwear, as a man, I think you're looking at least 150 anyway.
Yeah.
At least. So, and it's like the lower end trainers are about what, 120? So why wouldn't you spend the extra £30 to get something that's gonna last longer and, in my opinion, looks better?
Mm-hmm.
So I gotta give props to my uncle as well, because he has like a lot of shoes and they last him for ages. And I'm finding myself replacing my Nike trainers every year, spending £180. I'm like, I can't live like this. I can't live like this. So I said, yeah, I'm gonna get it down to 6 shoes. Then if I feel like getting trainers after that, then I'll do that. But I know that I have my core, what's the word that I'm looking for? My core is good. Yeah. So I'm not having to worry that I haven't got the right shoes for the occasion. Because not that people wear like trainers with suits and that, but my thing is you can't wear trainers everywhere. There are some places that are like no trainers. So you have to have a pair of, this is just me anyway, this is the way I approach it. You have to have a pair of shoes that will get you in anywhere. Like, they're never going to say to you, you can't come in because you're wearing shoes. But they'll say to you, you can't come in because you're wearing trainers.
Yeah.
So I said, okay, let me get my shoes down pat first, then I'll extend to the trainers. So if I was to give to advice to anyone younger that's wanting to get into the fashion thing, or not even a fashion thing, that's wanting to build their wardrobe, because fashion and just having a wardrobe is completely different. I would say start off with the shoes, then get trainers. And don't worry about your friends saying, oh, you're wearing shoes, blah, 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 because groupthink is another thing. Groupthink is another thing, but just have your wardrobe down pat and be comfortable.
I feel like there's you walk differently. You feel different when you walk in with something of a little bit more class.
Yeah.
Like, I'm liking the James Bond type sauce right now. Yeah. I'm not going to lie. I love suits. I just got another one yesterday for the collection. Shirts, different ties, everything. And it's a necessity in a man's wardrobe, in my view, right? Depending, of course, on the life you want to lead. But even then, if you haven't got 2-3 suits at least, one for a wedding or one for a business meeting, something like that, utility where you can use them, it's an investment into self.
Yeah.
Because when we look at the world today at the moment, it's not as common.
Yeah.
I was walking through London, today on the way here, and I'm not even a big up to myself or anything, but I had 3 or 4 people come up to me and say, oh, I like your suit. That's nice. I haven't seen that before or whatever. And don't get me wrong, it's nice to hear it, but what it made me realise is that, of course, this is just not common.
Yeah.
I mean, I was walking through King's Cross, and you've got people who are working in big banks and stockbrokers walking through in their suits or whatever as well. But they're normal.
Yeah.
It's bringing it out again with the vintage.
Yeah.
That's coming back. I feel like.
Yeah.
Especially in tailoring and suits. For example, we've got like the Peaky Blinders fashion.
Yeah.
Right, them kind of suits, and then you've got the 30s sort of Chicago type. All of those sort of era in terms of tailoring that I see coming back.
Yeah.
And it sort of makes me realise that when we follow trends, the things that are no longer popular become popular because it cycles. It recycles constantly.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I think in regards to the suits thing, I think a lot of people are wearing suits because they have to.
Yeah.
It feels different when you wear suits because you want to. And I think they've done like a study that how the most masculine thing a man can wear is a suit. And obviously we know that men have this thing about being masculine, but the way in which, like, they want to be treated like a grown man, but they don't present themselves as a grown man should.
Yeah.
Like, no disrespect to anyone before you not get at me, but you're not going to see a grown man in graphic tees and ripped jeans, respectfully. But so, I don't know, like, you can't be doing boy things and expecting man results. So something's got to change. I'm not saying you have to change, but that's just how I approached it. I said, wanting something and not willing to change anything is the definition of insanity. So you have to be willing to wait the changes where necessary.
I'd even go as far to say as well, before you start even upgrading the fashion aspect, build your character.
Agreed.
I mean, the amount of people I've met that have put this persona on with the fashion sense and the way that they walk in, great. And then you have a conversation with them, you think, oh, fuck, that was disappointing.
No, I agree.
And it's partially sure, have expectations of people. That's a limitation in itself. I won't argue that. But especially where the eyes are on people more than ever.
Yeah.
Again, media, everything's out there. You post an Instagram story and 100 people have seen you in your local area. Yeah. It's the character building as a good and strong character is a rare commodity now, especially in men, because they're subserving to, again, expectations of the materialism and being able to gentlemen, like it's lost. Now, chivalry, they say chivalry is dead. It's not dead, it's just missing. Yeah. And it's now I see even within women what they look for as well. Red pill women specifically, which make up a very small percentage, are looking for that chivalry again because it's a rare commodity. Yeah. And of course, what's one reason mainly why men present themselves and upgrade themselves as well, apart from just themselves, it's to acquire, inevitably at some point, a mate. Yeah. So it's a sense of, we've seen other things with Andrew Tate and whoever else out there are talking on all the same subjects, really, the masculinity, femininity aspect. Yeah. Women don't like what they can't have commonly or have commonly. And in that sense, as a man trying to be out there within modern fashion, it's definitely that aspect of saying, okay, what isn't common now?
It's true, but not even to just women as well, but everyone, things that are rare have more value. So think of it like rarity has value. So if you want to be perceived as rare, you have to do things that people aren't doing. You have to separate yourself from the pack. And that was one thing as well why I had to change the way that I dress. Because I don't want to dress like everyone. Yeah. I pride myself on being unique. So I don't want to dress like everyone. And funnily enough, people are very, not that I care like that, but the feedback has been polarizing. As in, some people have been like, oh, you know what, I like this fit, it's cool. Whereas some people have been like, oh, you're doing too much. You're doing this, you're doing that. I'm like, face your front. Face your front. Don't watch me. I'm cool. I'm cool doing me. Face your front. But then I can't lie. I have taken it. Not that I've taken it a bit too far, but you know when you realize that you are not doing enough.
Yeah.
So in terms of like the grooming, I put my skincare routine out there. But yeah, so I'm doing the grooming, all of that, and my friends like people, not even my friends, some of my friends and my aunt's like, oh, you do a lot to get ready. I'm like, yeah. I'm like, if you were taking this long to get ready, it would be normal. Why is it when men want to take care of themselves and take care of their appearance along with other things, it's seen as it's almost spoken down on?
I'm wondering if it's because. Do you think it's because it's not normal, or because deep down those people want that fashion themselves but aren't confident enough to pull it off?
I think that's part of it. I shouldn't even be saying this, but there was one time at uni, me and my boys, we tried to go to a club. They said, oh yeah, you're not allowed in because you're wearing trainers. We're like, oh, okay. But then we're looking around and we're seeing people get in with trainers. And I'm like, I didn't even want to play the race card or nothing like that. But my thing is, the gem that I left with was, I'm never getting rejected from a club because I'm never dressed appropriately. I don't want it to be like, oh, he's not dressed appropriately, so he can't come in. There has to be another reason.
Yeah. Yeah. Is as in the sense of, are you saying that you do it to yourself?
Yeah, as in, if you're going to a club or whatever, and they're saying, oh, you don't meet the dress code, you can't come in. In my opinion, that sounds like a lack of preparation to me.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day as well, it's. I found, I'm not sure if it's common around here, but I found definitely whereabouts in the UK I'm from as well. There's a lot of that around within cities that have popular unis as well. In terms of like that dress code in clubs.
Okay. Yeah.
Right? I'm not sure if it's something unanimous across the country. I haven't seen, nor have I been on a night out in all cities. But something I noticed as well, I'm not sure if you'd experienced this, is that generally the guys that do dress quite well, when they get into the clubs, they kind of pride themselves on that fact because they see the guys outside, who are unprepared, and they're thinking, nah, we got let in.
Yeah.
We came, we stepped with it or whatever, and then you got the guys outside that are missing in that as well. So I'm wondering if it's a bit of an ego thing as well.
Yeah, I mean, like when you dress good, you are like, let's be honest. When you dress good, you are gonna feel yourself. Like, and that's normal. And I think there's something in men innately in them that makes them want to compete. So they are going to look at the other guy and be like, he ain't dressed like me. I'm not going to say it's bad, but I'm not going to deny that it exists. Like I'm not going to deny that it exists. I'm not going to deny that it exists. Like, how can I explain this without being polite? Like, I've definitely looked at some of like my friends and been like, you don't dress better than me. And they might have done the same to me too. But I think there is that does exist within men, definitely.
So my question to you on that is then, what was the turning point that you realised you needed to up the game?
I watched the Kevin Samuels video. That's the truth. That's the God's honest truth. I watched the video and I said, I was looking at my trainers, I was looking at my clothes, and I said, my trainers are not in the best condition right now. I have so many clothes in my wardrobes, but I feel like I have no clothes. Something's got to... That's the worst feeling, you know? Like, clothes to the heavens. to the heavens, like, and on a night out, I'm scrambling. I'm like, I don't even know what to wear, you know. I said, nah, something's got to change. So I said, I've got my Russell and Bromley Chelsea boots. They are my go-to. So I said, you know what, I need to add to this. So I got a pair of monk straps, which I'm going to bring out at my friend's wedding. And I got a pair of Arigatos. I think the next pair I'm going to get is either a pair of black Chelsea boots or some brown loafers. Oh yeah, by the way, little tip, pause. When it comes to shoes, brown over black. Black is, you can save the black for, let's say, the Chelsea boot and the whole cut Oxford shoe. But other than that, the rest of them, you can mess around with like the dark browns and the tans. Because in my opinion, brown is more versatile. What are your thoughts?
I would agree. Brown goes with more. And that sounds strange because black's such a neutral colour. But because of what you wear normally with loafers, it makes sense. And it's a bit more class.
Yeah.
I mean, you can wear black smart shoes, but you're wearing black smart shoes in your school uniform when you go to school.
Yeah, it is true.
Shit flickers.
It is
so
true.
You've got to diversify a little bit, especially again if you're looking to wear like suits and higher end sort of classy clothing. Man, I would agree.
And you know what's funny? Yeah, it's this thing that I'm on where I'm trying to dress smart and stuff. It's taken on a life of its own because I was going to Swindon. It was near Swindon. It's called Colne, Colne. I was going there for the weekend to visit a friend. I've seen a guy on the tube, like he's wearing like a blazer, nice pocket square, trousers, shoes. So I've complimented him. I'm like, oh, you got a night, like you're looking dapper. And he's like, oh, appreciate it. And he's like, oh, I like your tracksuit. And I'm like, I appreciate it, but I'm like, obviously it was a casual thing, innit? So I was just wearing a tracksuit, but I'm just like, we had like a whole conversation. Like we started having a whole conversation. It's like, oh, what do you do? Blah, blah, blah. And I think he works closely with the UN. He's like an entrepreneur. But all that, and he said he wants to come on a podcast. So I'm gonna get him on soon. So watch out for that. But all of it started from me complimenting what he was wearing. And if he was, I'll be honest, because let's be honest, we all judge people, innit? And we all judge people on what they wear. So, not say all, but we judge people on how they present themselves. I'll put it like that. So, if he hadn't presented himself in a smart way, I probably wouldn't have approached him. Because I would have thought, oh, he's just part of the crowd.
See, I totally get that, especially in kind of a business aspect.
Yeah.
Right? It's like you said earlier, with that male competitiveness, inevitably, it's a primal thing. It's built into us, based and rooted in survival, right? So that competitiveness can be healthy, as an example like that. But I'm wondering what the limit is, and what point does it become a hindrance to present yourself too well?
I don't think it could be a hindrance. How can you present yourself too well?
Well, for example, overdoing it, overdressing. So, you're presenting yourself in a way that is, seemingly well, you dress well, look after yourself, but then you're entering into a situation where the people there are also not at that sort of level. And I found that when you enter into situations, it's not even egotistically, but it's from the point of, let's say you walk into a lounge, right? And you've got a group of people, it's a friend's party. Don't get me wrong, they're all wearing, I don't know, a shirt and some chinos or something. And then you walk in a three-piece suit and God knows whatever else on, the most extravagant person in the room. Sometimes that can read off as arrogance from people. Now, I know that that's a limitation of theirs, and you shouldn't have to accommodate for that. But I've also noticed that there's levels to it. So there are certain ways where you can wear a suit wherever you want. I've just walked through Wood Green, in a complete burgundy suit and a hat as well. But no one's bothered me. There's just places where you can capitalize. Less is more, I would say. So sometimes less is more in situations where people aren't wearing more. because although it makes you stand out, sometimes that can also attract unwanted attention, I would say.
Yeah, no, that is true. That is true. But I think in the scenario, I think personally, there's always another level. And as you're talking about the men's competitiveness, step your game up. If someone is encouraging you to step your game up, that can't be a bad thing unless maybe the person is content at the level that they're at. Or quite frankly, the person just doesn't want to grow. Because we can be stubborn at times. We can be set in our own way of thinking. But I think growth requires pain and being challenged. So I get it. You're comfortable in your tracksuit and your graphic tees and your ripped jeans. But just try something. Just go a bit smarter. See how you feel.
Do you think there has to be extremes where you've got to push yourself to those extremes at a level where you can explore everything? So, I mean, you mentioned earlier how sometimes you'd be told that, you're doing too much. I'm wondering if to be able to truly discover if you like a new style, you've got to go from zero to there, because everything else in between is like, oh, okay, so if I could pull that off, everything else falls into line.
Yeah. Do I think it's extreme? No. Because, put it like this, when it comes to things that really matter and occasions that really matter, people know how to dress. So if it's a wedding, people know how to dress. If it's a birthday, they know how to dress. Even if it's a lad's night out, like, the guys will at least wear a button down.
Yeah.
So it's like, if you know that, like, you know subconsciously there's a proper way to dress, but I think people are just comfortable in what they do repeatedly. Like, they don't frequently dress smart. The smartest that I think people probably dress is probably to work and probably school, college, or sixth form if you're wearing uniform. So I think there's almost a negative connotation with uniform.
Yeah.
And suit is almost uniform. So I'm wearing this suit because I have to wear it to work to make money and stuff. So if I don't have to wear a suit, then I won't wear a suit. I think that's how most people approach it. Whereas wearing a suit because you want to and wearing a suit because you have to are two completely different things.
Yeah. I can understand that. And it takes a certain confidence to be able to wear a suit in a way that is just because you can.
Yeah,
definitely.
No, as in, you know what? As in, I used to think that how, you know what my pet peeve is though? As in, when you see someone that's wearing a suit and it's just not presented properly. Like, it's not tailored properly. Like, shirts all creased. It just turns, like, for me, it's just a turn off. And I'm a very detailed person. So when I've left my house today, yeah, I've walked out of my house, I look at my blazer, I see that bare fluff I see that loads of fluff on the shirt. So I walk back in and I'm like, oh, my lint roller. Like, my friends always get at me, yeah, because they call me gadget guy. Because I always have gadgets. Like, so I have a lint roller and I have an electric one that removes like bubbles and stuff. Like, you have to have, for me personally, I don't see how people don't have these things.
Lint rollers are lifesavers, I'll be honest. I love turtlenecks, yeah? Turtlenecks are my thing.
Yeah.
But because of what the material they're mostly made of, I've got 2 dogs. I've got 3 cats, right? I can't be sat anywhere in the house without it, bits are all over the place. Yeah. So, again, just these essentials. But people are missing the essentials as well. Not even getting the most out of it.
Exactly. Like, and they're cheap as well. So do yourself a favor. And it's just, and you know what I think as well? I think a lot of it is because people are trying to impress other people more so than they're doing it for themselves. And I think that's where I think people don't want to put in the effort, because they're like, I'm not going to put in this much effort to impress someone else. Yeah. And I understand that. But if you're doing it for you, then the drive would be different.
Mm-hmm.
Like, once upon a time, I didn't take care of my skin the way that I do now. It's not for anyone else. But if someone else appreciates it, of course I'm gonna be happy. I'm not gonna act like it's like hearing compliments is not nice.
Yeah.
But you have to be self-validated. So that's why when people are saying whatever they're saying, I can block it out.
Because it complements what you already believe about yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you have to start with the end in mind. So when you're doing things, people don't even know what your vision is and what goal you have for it.
Mm-hmm.
So they just see that as, oh, this guy's just full of himself. So he just being extra. It's like, nah, and it's not even that. And even me, like, I haven't always had the best skin. So I have to do more. I get it. Some people don't have to do as much as me, but I have to do more.
See, that's what astonishes me, right? At this point, it's for somebody who takes care of themselves appropriately, and does the most to be able to do that, is also seen as extra. That's the levels that it's at the moment. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Like, even taking care of yourself, as a man or a woman for that matter, at a level that is genuinely sufficient, good skincare routine, good health, dental, hair, everything is seen as superficial in certain ways.
Yeah.
And I get doing the most where, you're trying to turn yourself into a Barbie doll, or you're, taking more steroids than, well, I'll leave that one out. Not too controversial, but just the standard has lowered massively, I'd say, because people are able to mask it in more ways as well. So that hidden, and a bigger party, Jenny, on this as well, it's something on the show that I mentioned you were talking about, is that people mask the sort of what's going on beneath, right? Yeah. People mask the idea that, they look from an external point of view like they take care of themselves well. But then when you get to know them and you see some of those inner parts, it's different.
Yeah.
It's just amazing to me how the bar is lowered, but people confide more in the masks that people wear than actual wellness.
Yeah, no, it's true. When you're talking about masks, the first thing that came to mind, even this is real bad, is slide. That people are not comfortable with themselves.
Yes.
And it shows by the way that you ask them questions and just the way they present themselves. So, ladies, don't have a go at me. I get it, you want to make up as an enhancer, but if you've got bad skin, there's a dermatologist there. And I get it, it's a bit pricey, but you have to invest in yourself. And this is just me personally. Any investment in yourself can never be too much. And anyone that says to you that investing in yourself is too much, that person is not for you.
Yeah. Just
to put it plain, because I think people prioritize the wrong things, and I was that person once upon a time. So I'm not saying it as if I'm better than anyone. It's just you are a priority, you matter. So how you present yourself to the world matters.
I'm wondering if, because as we also know, I'm sure anybody watching has seen some point of, whether it be a YouTube reel or something on Instagram, but SMV, social market value.
Yeah.
Right? And I see that that's decreasing massively in both men and women as a result of those masks being worn as well, right? The bar being lowered. And it's hard, and I say this objectively, but I see it in women especially, where because women want to be taken care of for themselves and embraced for themselves, which I totally get. They want to be loved for who they are, but they also put out an image of what they think they should be. And there's a complete disconnect there. And it's like, what do you expect by wanting to be cared for, who, for your authentic self, I hate using that term because it's overused completely, but principle stands, but then putting yourself a different version out there. Men do it as well. but I say women more just because of how they're built,
Yeah.
psychologically, mentally. They strive more on social validation. And I was having a conversation with my own partner actually about this yesterday, and she was sort of saying how she loves to dance, she loves to sort of move freely, right? But then part of her, at a previous point, still liked the idea of what that brings to her as well, in terms of she just wants to be able to entertain people in a non sort of derogatory way, and I see that also in a lot of women as well, just because of how they're built again socially as a creature.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to see how in modern day, because of the social norms within anything from materialism to self-care, wellness, how that's presented amplifies that. And I'm wondering your thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, I can see that. I can see how women seek the social validation. I can see it, but my thing is, don't men do it as well?
Yes, but I would say that they do it in a less forward way. Some of it is obvious to people. However, some of it for men, I feel, is more subliminal and nuanced.
Okay.
So in the sense that, for example, when a woman goes out to a nightclub, right? They're all getting dressed up, they're wearing makeup, etc. as well. Cool, I totally get that. You want to look nice, respectable, presented. But then men will go out, and don't get me wrong, they may be wearing designer, right? But there's a certain level of, okay, this guy's wearing that, he's got that brand, etc. as well. I'm trying to look like the macho man. And it's more nuanced psychologically.
Okay.
So what I'm saying is, women, of course, have that competitiveness, but its intention and the reason why is different.
Yeah.
Women want to be able to look in a way that is respected and presentable. But men look at it in a way that they want their social market value to increase as well. They want to be a high value man.
Yeah.
But this brings it back to earlier. They're decreasing their character build by focusing on the external purely.
Yeah.
And women, of course, maybe part of them wants to be that high value woman, but we've seen also with social construct once more that the values are going out the window. Less traditional women, less traditional men. It's just affected in different ways, I'd say.
Yeah. And I do agree with that point, because when you hear about like the breakdown of relationships, it's never because of something external. It's always because of something internal. So as much as we're saying image is important, which it is, because we need to be attractive to other people, the intrinsic internal values do matter. So question to you is there a way in which you can make someone prioritize the internal values ahead of the external values?
Someone as in, you mean a potential partner or anybody?
Anybody, like a client for your business or a potential partner.
It's a premise of what you value as a person. For example, I'll use different contexts and we'll look at it in different ways. So let's take a potential business partner, right? I've had 2 businesses over the last 2 years with 2 different partners. The first partner, we met at first, and he was actually potentially going to be a client of mine, as a coaching and a mentee. And then we realised we hit it off, and great, we got on well. We decided to start a business, but we were already friends. And then the second business was a result of carrying the first business with another person in that, where we became friends first. No, sorry, we were business partners first and then became friends. So in context of being able to get into a route of somebody and then being able to respond to you in a way that is core, I would definitely say, find something of a common interest that you already have with them. Because you can understand a person very quickly from how they action on anything from passions, their work, their social life dynamics. Because picture their life dynamics, their job, their relationships, their friends, family, interests. They are the ways that you calibrate a person. It's how we look at people and judge people. So being able to form, let's say in a business partnership, being able to see how a person operates in other operating areas to then judge and calibrate that person is a great way to be able to do so. It's letting them put all of their cards on the table.
Yeah.
But it's the same in relationships, right? We see this constantly. Back to the masks again, where people put this best version of themselves across to their partners, and then they get so far down the line in a relationship, past the honeymoon phase, and then suddenly these tells start to come through, and they go, "Oh, but they've changed," or "You're not who you used to be." Most of the time, they are, and they haven't changed at all. There's just parts of themselves that they've kept suppressed for being able to get themselves through the door
Yeah.
that have then come up later. That's why they say, "Oh, people stop trying." But again, it's the same thing. They wear a mask. You can judge it by how they have the relationships with other people, friends, family. So, in the short answer, I would say look at how they treat the external first, and then peer inwards. It's looking inwards always.
No, I hear that. I hear that. I think I do hear you, and I think when it comes to the external, I think after a while it does get a bit. I don't want to say boring, but it does get tiring because the external is cool, but I think any value that you bring to someone is definitely going to be intrinsic.
Yeah.
So giving someone like a different way about thinking about something is going to be more valuable than what I'm going to wear tomorrow.
Mhm.
So I do think how they respond to the internal value and how they respond to the external value is very important. And I think that's why I may be speaking for myself here. I think a woman that is too craving of social validation is a bit of a turn off for me.
Yeah, it's a red flag for sure. I mean, even from the point of giving somebody that understanding as well and helping them do so, that's a different story. From understanding people, yeah, you can look at it at how they treat things externally, but asking questions, man.
Yeah.
Just asking questions. I mean, the amount of times, and in my relationships, I build the culture where we don't argue. There's no arguments. There'll be the tough discussions that you've got to have, inevitably about the tough pills to swallow. But because it's creating kind of an environment where everything's on the table.
Yeah.
If there is an issue, you talk about it, and that's one of the biggest reasons why relationships break down. There's a lack of communication constantly because there's that lack of inwardness. Internal sort of dialogue, and people are trying to understand each other through how they want the other person to be, but have a hard time accepting how a person is, and that's what I think the dichotomy is. Right? There's ultimately the value comes from the intrinsic, but when people look at that, they try and wield it into the reality of their own because they want it to be something else, and then wonder why they get disappointed. Whether it's controversial or not, that's for you guys to say. But I am a soul. Careful how I use my words. I strongly observe that most of what we have as expectations of people, even partners, friends, aren't what they've put out to us, but are what we've created for ourselves. And we do it to ourselves.
Yeah. As in, we don't, when it comes to the other people, we don't manage our expectations well.
No.
We have too higher expectations of people. Do you think?
Yeah, because we're conditioned, again, social media. All we're fed through social media is a sense of identity, false identity, lifestyle, the image of the modern man, designer, whatever else, right? And how people are glorified as characters. But then, as we know already, people wear a mask. So people accommodate to their sense of how they view people based on social construct again. But then ultimately, it's all a phallus, as we know. So that's what I'm saying, is that people's expectations is based on what is conditioned into them, not what is there. Hence why there's far more disappointment. And those expectations aren't controlled because people aren't also in control of their minds for the most part.
So how would we manage our expectations then?
Well, this is where we get into what I do. Which everybody has this shell-like identity that they identify with. All of us have, human beings, right? It's not individual, but we're raised into a world, and we believe in a certain religion. We follow a certain religion. We have certain political views, views on gay marriage, whatever it is. All of it's conditioned into us. We're not born with it, but it's about looking first at self and how you identify. The shell identity is rooted in limitation, right? It's none of it creates this reality of what we think is. So then coming to the core identity, which is what our potential is, that's everything outside of that. And it's not impossible to reach, but it's sort of looking at, it starts with self, and it's looking at the point of, okay, why do I believe this? Why do I think this? Why do I feel a way about this? The why behind the why behind the why, which finds its origins. And then through doing so, it's something you can practice with other people. But it's re-identifying yourself completely out of that social construct. Not to say that, you can't adopt it. Some of it can be progressive. It's to think that you can completely detach yourself forever is delusional, and it won't happen.
Yeah.
But I'm saying that it's redefining. Admittedly, I'm putting it in the most simple terms possible. It's redefining how you look at your sense of identity, and in turn, your perspective reality on others changes also.
Yeah. No, I agree. I hear that. I think when it comes to like ourselves and how we view ourselves, I personally, and I think this is something that I was guilty of, like, I never used to ask myself questions. And I think, I remember one time I was at uni, I done philosophy at uni, and we were going around just saying like, what people's background, what people believe in. And then it came to my turn, and they were like, Catholic. And they're like, why are you Catholic? I'm like, what do you mean, why am I Catholic? I'm like, I believe in God. And they're like, why do you believe in God? And they're like, do you believe in God because you went to church with your parents when you were young? Like, have you actually questioned the validity of your belief? And I was there. I didn't say a word for about 30 minutes. I didn't say a word for about 30 minutes. But that was when I realized how powerful questions are. Because if you're constantly questioning yourself, ultimately, you're going to reach an answer. You may not like the answer that you reach, but you're going to reach an answer. And I think that is always, that's why I've said this to Ephraim, shout out Ephraim, the Socratic method is undefeated.
Yeah.
Because you get to the root cause, you get to the bottom of everything, and you just gain an understanding. It's like, so that's why this person. And I think as you ask questions, you gain more of an understanding. And I think it's not about being right. I think a lot of people pride themselves about being right. I pride myself on understanding people.
Yeah. And then through that, you sort of learn to understand yourself.
Yeah.
And this is where it gets onto the whole argument that, we're all individual thinkers. We all think in a different way, right? But having spoken to hundreds, if not thousands of people just through the nature of the work I do, it's fairly obvious to realize that no, we're not all as different as we think we are.
Yeah.
We're human beings. We have the same ways of thinking. Hence why if we were all that unique, we wouldn't have things like sheep mentality.
Yeah. It's true. Yeah. Things like groupthink and sheep, they wouldn't exist. And even I think when you were talking earlier, like, I kind of had a vision in my mind of how I thought this episode was going to go. But as soon as you started speaking, it just threw that out of the water completely. I'm like, so I relate to this guy more than I would have guessed. But if I didn't actually give you the platform to speak and say what you're saying, then I would have understood you. And I think if people care to actually just connect with people properly, and just not be so self-absorbed. You read How to Win Friends and Influence People, haven't you?
I actually haven't read the whole book.
You haven't read it?
No.
It just says, the art of asking conversations is just making it more about the other person. as opposed to yourself. It says the psychology of people is people love talking about themselves. So if you're having a conversation with someone with the intent of getting to know them, it would be in your best interest to probe the other person to talk about themselves. So open-ended questions that don't give you a yes or a no is a good way to start.
Yeah, it forces people to give away more.
Yeah.
Because one thing I have read and practiced religiously is the art of war.
Okay.
Part of that is, allow your enemy to empty their, armory so that you may fill yours.
Yeah.
And the philosophy in that is that it's very much rooted in conversation as well and communication. It's something I practiced for quite a period of time, and it was that you gain this ability over time to understand people's words before they say them, because you understand those archetypal ways that people think. And in all the work that I've done, I've come to the conclusion that the reason why we have it is just that human beings as a whole need the sense of certainty, even if it's deluded. And it's in the same with who we think people are. It's a safety thing, right? If we don't know who a person is, there's that nervousness naturally there to who are they? Like you mentioned there with the podcast episode, there was an expectation of maybe who I was, and then it goes out the window. But there needed to be something there to be able to form a reality. Otherwise, it's like, it could be a serial killer for all I know. Right?
Yeah, I'll be honest, I shouldn't even be saying this, but before every podcast, I'm bare nervous. I'll be honest, I'm proper nervous. But as soon as you start talking, it goes out the window.
Yeah.
And I think you sort of need to, like, it's okay to feel. I think that's one thing that I used to sort of, like not having they say men shouldn't have emotions.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that. This is just me. This is my perspective. I think you should feel what you're feeling. Don't ignore what you're feeling, because you're feeling these things for a reason. They're probing you to act a certain way. I think it's how we respond to how we feel is the problem. And I think, okay, if you're feeling nervous having a conversation, just let it ride. Or furthermore, just take the burden off yourself. If you're feeling nervous about talking, get the other person to talk and just listen.
And that's again where asking questions comes into play.
Yeah.
It's a pressure release method, and interrogators use it. Right? It's called pressure release method because there's a certain amount of pressure they will apply to a person to the point that it gets near a breaking point, and then they'll release it. Same with interviewers, same with podcasters like yourself, right? Where it's constantly pressing on the gas of a person, hitting their limits, and then it's sort of saying, oh, okay, actually, cool now, take a step back for a breather so we don't sabotage everything. And what that does to a person is it makes them feel comfortable, but it brings other parts of themselves out that they didn't realize or have suppressed. And I'm wondering if, have you ever watched podcast Impact Theory, Tom Bilyeu?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you notice his, and anybody else out there who's watched it, brilliant. If you haven't,
podcast is proper good.
I recommend it. But it's his ability to ask the right questions to get the maximum out of his guests is phenomenal.
Yeah,
because he knows what to ask, and then you'll notice that they'll get really into it, and then there'll be a period he'll suddenly say, "Okay, there'll be some sort of joke that's passed on, or I've experienced it too," and he'll bring it on to himself because it creates that balance.
Yeah, no, I think as well. I think when you have the right questions, as in what is it? It gives people. I think personally, it gives like great content, because I'll be honest, like when I first started, I was like, I'm gonna have a certain set of questions that I'm gonna ask my guests. Then there was one time, I don't even remember who it was off the top of my head, but I got a one-word answer, and I was like, no, but
where do I go from here?
Yeah, I'm like, where do I go from here? But I was like, okay, cool. I have to ask better questions. And I'm like, questions that don't require a yes or no. And you kind of have to push the needle a bit. Like, don't play it safe. Like, obviously there's certain questions that I won't ask just out of respect for the guest, but you have to sort of, because the audience need to connect with you as well. So, yeah.
This is just for everybody else listening as well, but call it a bit of a value drop. One of the biggest things that I have people ask me when I work with them, especially as sort of mentees and trainees, is how do I know what the right questions are to ask, especially to yourself? Because you're never used to asking those questions, to find those unknown yet present answers. A way of being able to do so, mainly within self as well, is asking yourself the questions that you wouldn't want to be asked by others.
Yeah.
Because the reason why is that the fact that you wouldn't want to be asked that by anybody else suggests that there's some sort of resistance or limitation present.
I agree. The questions that are the most uncomfortable to ask are the ones that you need to ask. And I'm not even going to go into it, but there was a certain situation that I was having with my family member. I'm not going to say who it was. But then I asked them a question. I'm like, oh, so when this happened, what was going on with you at the time? Because I don't think no one sat down to actually ask you, like, what was going on at the time? And she just explained it to me. I'm like, oh. I was literally just sitting there like this. I was like, oh, that makes sense. So that explains the behavior. And I think with understanding comes patience. And I think the reason why people snap and are so quick to get angry is because they haven't got patience and they're not willing to like understand the person. Because we can see someone acting crazy and think this person just acting crazy, but normally there's something there's something that's influenced this behavior.
Yeah,
and that's why, to bring it back, why I was asking about the how did the dysfunction affect you? Because normally when you see people acting in a dysfunctional way, it's normally because growing up or whatever, they've normalized dysfunctional behavior. And to bring it back to what you do, how would you tell like your clients? Is it clients?
Yeah.
How would you tell your clients that the behavior that you've normalized is not normal? Because I do that. Sorry to cut you. As in, I do that a lot as well. As in, I'll look back at certain stuff and I'll be like, that was not normal. Yeah. Not at all. But at the time it happened, it felt so normal. So how do you sort of break it down to them that the behavior that you think is normal is not normal?
I'll be honest, I don't always go about it in the way that I say it's normal or not, because that actually reinforces the shell identity in a way. Okay. It's a very complex thing, because when people say, oh, if I say to a client, right, what you've been through is not normal. No kid should have ever gone through that. Even if that is the case and it's right. Through doing so, it's reinforcing their mentality of, oh, I've really been through some hardship. And then again, with the nature of the shell, they start to identify within that, right?
Yeah.
And that keeps them in limitation. So, for example, I explained, it's what I call backstory. Explained earlier at the beginning, of course, so you guys get to know me more, some of that story. When I talk about it, none of it bothers me now. I'm not remotely affected by it because I've completely re-identified out of that. Now, it's where people come to me and they say, oh, but I want to know how to heal. And I'll tell them, you're in the wrong place. Because I've never been able to speak to somebody so far and ask them, what does it mean to heal? And they be able to give me an answer that isn't acceptance of what is. They may dance around it or try and find an extravagant way of putting it across. But ultimately, what is the process of healing from these experiences? You're going to put a helicopter plaster on and then suddenly wake up and it's gone? No. It's simply an acceptance of what is now beyond your control and what's happened. And most of the time, the reason why people spend a lifetime healing, as they call it, is because a part of them just refuses to accept that control, surrender to it and release to be able to truly move on. So in answer to your question, how do I communicate that to people? I don't. I do the opposite. I bring them through questions and other methods to realize that there is a completely other potential identity out of it.
Yeah.
It's like a character in a video game, right? You've got 2 video games, all open world. First game, it's a completely customizable character. You build him from the start up, right? You finish the game, you pick up all the armor and the guns and the upgrades, whatever it is, and then suddenly you get to the end of the game and go, okay, what do I do now? It's just a free roam, but you can only go so far within the parameters of that game, its map, and everything within that character. But then the second game comes out and there's a completely new character, and then you've got to redefine it again. You've got to customize once more, but you can't take over the characteristics of the old one to the new. It's starting from scratch. That's the way I look at the human condition. It's fundamentally you can't have both, and it's why people fall down this idea of what's called the abyss, where part of them wants to fully transcend out of that identity and the limitation that comes with it, but part of them also wants to stay in it because it provides comfort and ego. And through trying to do both, they fall down this hole and experience psychotic, neurotic episodes. So, yeah, really in the aspect of how I look at it, it's a complete shift, transcendence beyond that.
Okay.
Not getting rid of it, because that limiting identity is there for survival, but we're trying to thrive. And it serves no purpose other than being in the back. For most people, it governs their lives.
Yeah. Nah, I get that. And I think that whole abyss thing is prevalent in so many ways, because there are people that want to transcend to, let's say, a different social class or just be in a different environment, but the people that they associate with may not necessarily be good for them, but they're comfortable there. So that sort of dichotomy of wanting to transcend, but being comfortable in something that's not productive for you, leading to you an abyss, is something that I totally understand and can resonate with.
Yeah. A perfect example of this is a guy trying to get out of the hood. Yeah. So you've got a guy who wants and realizes that there's more to life, but then, as much as they're working towards that, and they have the means of being able to leave completely, they're constantly tied back in to it through friends saying, oh yeah, but you're leaving us behind, or you're ditching us, where's the loyalty? Now, I'll be very precise with the words that I use, because I am also aware that I personally haven't grown up in an environment like this. However, I've had enough experience to see with people who have, I understand human beings as a whole, no matter where they come from. So it's they end up getting tied back into the hood in this context, even though they don't need to, because there's that abyss again. They're trying to do both. And then ultimately something bad happens, or they lose it all, and they end up back in square one. But then it's that one thing, and you may be able to understand or help me understand this, partially my ignorance, I'm sure, but I've never been able to understand the idea of that principle of, oh, okay, but you've left me behind. Why would you leave me behind when you're trying to get out the hood or out of a bad situation? When ultimately you've given that person everything that they could possibly do to transcend that identity again, but they don't.
I think with that, I think a lot of it, like a lot of this conversation, it ties in so many different ways. For me, I'm looking at it as the social validation. They have social validation amongst the people in the hood that they're with, and they don't want to leave that, because again, human beings, we like comfort.
Yeah.
So they're gonna want that. They're gonna still want that social validation, and where they've probably grown up in dysfunctional environments and been around dysfunction, because let's be honest, the hood is dysfunctional. So the social validation combined with the normalized dysfunctionality is going to keep you there. But I think where my thing is the loyalty. Like, I think a lot of people have misplaced loyalty. Like, it's one thing to be loyal, and it's one thing to know who to be loyal to.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of it is misplaced loyalty. You don't owe anyone anything. And I think that's where a lot of people in the hood, quote unquote, fall short in my view. They don't owe anyone anything because there's only one body going in that casket at the end of the day. The only person you have an obligation to is your family, really. I'm saying your family. But even at that, even the obligation you have to them goes so far because they've made their own choices the same way you make your own choices. So if I'm choosing to better myself, if that means I have to leave you behind, that's just the way it has to be. And wouldn't you want better for me anyway if you claim to be my so-called friend? If you're my friend and I see you going up, I'm going to be like, yeah, go. If I'm a true friend. But if I'm trying to drag you into the abyss, I can't say I'm truly your friend. It's the crabs in the bucket. It really is the crabs in the bucket.
It's that's funny. I was having a conversation with my friend and business partner yesterday, actually, and we were talking about this sort of subject. But me and my sort of trio of friends, there's three of us, right? We keep to ourselves, but we all do business together. We're all boys, right? And there's three different extremes. I come from a home that is fairly middle class, done well. I've had luxuries that a lot of people haven't. And then my other friend comes from a place that is, although they've struggled, the environment isn't optimal, but it's also not extremely unsafe to the point where they're waking up every morning, there's a shooting outside or something, right? And then my third friend, he is very much within that environment. He's very much in a space where, you can't leave certain areas of the neighborhood without being targeted. And it was interesting to see, and we were talking about these three extremes, but it was interesting to see how both myself and my friend who was within that middle ground, we sort of looked at our other friend, not mentioning names, of course, for privacy, and said, all we want for him is to be able to, pull him out of that and really be able to help him any way possible.
Yeah.
You look after your people. We all want to eat together. All want to sit at the same table, so on. And it's interesting because he has all the resources and the potentials there, but then there's part of him through family that's still sucked into some of that life, right? And it's interesting how it's coming up now because it's almost a reflection of what, the very thing we've been talking about. And it's something I will admittedly never understand truly myself because I haven't been raised in that environment. I've never had to go through some of the extreme aspects of this. So I won't claim to try and even understand it.
Yeah.
But the effects are just crazy. And I think that there's no in the middle. You either are fully in it or there's, you're just sitting there. Yeah. Trying to half-arse it will end up in tears.
Yeah. No, it's true. And I think as well, if I want to be completely honest, for all intensive purposes, I was raised well. Like, there was none of that sort of living life on the edge, have to worry about going certain areas. I never had any of that. And I think my family done a great job of making sure that I stick on the straight and narrow. And I think for people that have that danger, I don't really think, as in, I try to understand it, but I think at the end of the day, this is why it comes down, it's back to a matter of mindset because you have to want these things for yourself. Like, people are gonna want to see you do well, sure, but if they can hold you back, they will try and hold you back if they're not your genuine people. Because with certain people, sometimes you understand that their star shines bright and they're gonna go places. And if I want the best for them, which I want the best for everyone, I'm always going to give them that encouragement. Whereas people haven't got that luxury because of masks. As you said, people like to put this projection that they're secure about themselves, but really they're doing that to overcompensate for their insecurities. Like when you're secure in yourself, I don't even know how to explain it, but it's just, there's little to no ego. and you feel no way to encourage people. Because if you're my friend and I see you, if you're my friend and you're in a position to do well, that doesn't affect me negatively.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're insecure and you're led by ego, it's like, why is this guy doing well? It's not a conscious thought, it's a subconscious thing. It's like, oh, why is this guy going well? Why is everything going for him? Why is everything going well for him? Let me be an enemy of progress. So again, you have to, people, and this is one thing I've learned about human beings as well.
Mm-hmm.
I can't control what another human being wants. So if you want what you want, you have to be very focused and singular-minded about your pursuit of that. And I think based on how you've been brought up and how I've been brought up, I think the way in which you've brought up has almost been a blessing because it's almost forced us to be singular.
Yes.
And in being singular in approach to your mindset, you're not seeking that social validation. And when you're not seeking that social validation, it allows you to focus, in my view.
It's starting, again, it's that starting with self. Because everything else is a bonus after that, really. I tend to look at the way of the mind as the mind space, I like to call it. More spacious, of course, in that sense, hence the word, but it allows you to, through having that solitude, that isolation, in one way or another, it forces you to look inwards anyway, even when you're not in control of it. And most of the time, I call it a projection, but I can confidently say that most, if not all of us, at some point have experienced being with ourselves and not knowing what the fuck to do with it.
Yeah.
How to do anything with it, how to control it, what even any of it means. But because you build a certain adaptability, resilience, and mind space through doing so, it means everything else is a bonus outside of that. It's not governed by what people think of you or the way that you live, not trying to uphold that identity or mask. It's purely saying, okay, these are the dark parts of myself. These are the parts of myself that are a little lighter. And which is where we get into sort of, if really take it there, shadow integration and such subjects like that, which is a different matter altogether. But inner self, it's looking at all aspects of yourself and saying, okay, great. There are ways that this can be channeled. Because we try to deny versions and parts of ourselves that inherently are meant to be there and can't be completely rid of, because you have a brain that has the means of those faculties. And as long as you have a brain, they're always there. But yeah, it's really just looking at self and saying, okay, all right, how can I channel this? What utility does it have? As opposed to that sort of, where do I go with this? How does it all work? And as a result of that, as you've said, we've both been able, in a way, and continue to be able to, become much more versatile in the social construct of the world that we live, because you see things a little clearer. But it's what I like to call being a social chameleon. So, for example, a person can hang around with people who adopt a certain culture, religion, let's say, or political view, and do just fine because they know how to communicate with those people. They don't identify with that themselves, but they can play with the nuance. And then they can hang around with a completely different group of people.
Yeah.
So that's what I sort of think with mind space, because when you spend so much time with yourself, you evaluate how you look at things, and it means that you're in control most of the time when you're in these social situations.
Yeah, I can agree with that, because if I look at my range of friends, like they're from completely two different ends of the spectrum. Like I wouldn't say all my friends are sort of similar in terms of like personality, and I think because I am the way I am, I can sort of maneuver through everyone. And I think that's never not a bad gift to have.
Yeah, and you see people, they go so far because of it, when they know how to utilize it again. because it means that they can speak to people of any background and be able to push forward and still be reasonably secure in themselves because they've done the work. They've understood themselves. They've spent enough time without having the luxury of validation from others, hence the unpopular kids.
Yeah.
And as a result of that, that means everything else is a bonus. We see the popular kids in school, right? They peak so early, and then they come out of school, and then they realize often, oh, the world isn't as what I thought it was. People don't actually give a shit about who I am, what haircut I've got, and if I've got the new Nike Tech tracksuit on. Yeah, they're not they're not bothered about that. They come out and they realize, okay, now they've got to do the work. But then, as being, if you want to call it, the underdogs or the the black sheep, it's the other way around. And I find a lot of those kids come out of schools, which is arguably one of the most, validation-based environments that you can go through as a kid, or any part of life. And then they come out and they go, okay, well, I've been used already to not having to have friends and people say how cool I look and give me all this love. So they do far better because that's reality.
Yeah, no, I agree. Because even going through school, I wouldn't say I had one set friendship group. As in, I had like my friends that I were close with, but I used to sort of just like float around and mingle with everyone. So yeah, I can agree with that. What was I gonna say? I put a poll on Instagram, just a little segue, on what topics we should cover today. And they brought up Mr. West. So, what are your thoughts on Kanye's recent comings and goings? Pause.
I'll do a short answer first and then a long answer. Short answer is a person who's built it up, had it all, and suddenly is realizing he isn't as in control of his reality as he thought he was. That's my short answer. Long answer. He's a creative genius, and his ability is undoubted, whether it be business ventures, design, fashion, music. But he's also extremely neurodivergent.
Yeah.
And he also experiences psychological issues, bipolar being one of them, certain bouts of extreme depression, furthermore. But naturally, because he's in the public eye, that is amplified. So it seems far set apart from the majority. People like that experience it every day. To his extent, it's just amplified. But as a result of that, it's forcing him to have to amplify that even further because he's got to justify it. Now, admittedly, he puts himself in situations, podcasts, appearances, where he goes into these, and you'll notice when he speaks, he goes into these very in-depth and often quite aggressive rants or spiels about a certain subject. Now, sure, some of what he says may be on the mark, but I would say it's a result of keeping a wild animal in a cage for so long that when it's finally released, it doesn't know how to behave. So, for example, he's always been fairly out there with what he says and thinks, but now we've seen with the thing with Adidas, it's starting to close him down now.
Yeah.
Balenciaga as well. All of these sort of partnerships that he started to have, they're starting to try and box him in now, bad for the brand. And the more that happens to him, the more volatile he's getting.
Yeah.
So my thoughts on that, again, which reverts me back to the short answer, is that he's an individual that is realizing he doesn't have as much control over his life as he thought he was. And that's reflecting in his marriage, or has done with his marriage, his relationship with his kids, the whole Pete Davidson thing as well. Really, it's just a result, and an extreme result, of what can happen to a man or a person, but in this case he is a man, when they are backed into a corner with everything and have the whole eyes on them, of the world.
Yeah. No, I agree. I do think Kanye was not aware. He thought. I remember him saying that how he done an interview with Charlemagne on the Breakfast Club, and he was saying to have any real influence in the world, you have to be a billionaire. Obviously, when he said this, he was a millionaire at the time, on the cusp of being a billionaire, and he must have thought that how with him becoming a billionaire, that it would make him I wouldn't say untouchable, but he would have more to show for it. Like, you would think him being a billionaire doesn't give him more power over his kids.
Mm-hmm.
Him being a billionaire doesn't stop Balenciaga, Adidas, all these companies from saying, no, we can't deal with you no more.
Yeah.
Because the power that you have is given to you by someone else. It's not internal.
Yes.
So because the power is given to you by someone else, they can take it away. And that even reminds me, because I've got a lot of lights going off in my head. There's a book that I've read called Seat of the Soul. I don't know if you've heard of it. And it talks about external power and internal power.
Mm-hmm.
And it basically says souls that vibrate souls that have higher vibrations thrive off internal power, whereas the world as we see it is fighting for external power. And I think that's what Kanye West is doing. So he even said, you know what's funny? Like, I'm even moving like Kanye right now. Because, you know, in All Falls Down,
yes,
in the last verse where he says, F the police, that's how I treat them. We can buy our way out of jail, but we can't buy freedom. Mm-hmm. We can buy a lot of clothes, but we don't really need them. Things we buy to cover up what's inside.
Mm.
All of what he's doing is to cover up the mask.
Yes.
So he's done this fashion thing. Not even that he's done the fashion thing. It's a lot of it is a cover up, and I think a lot of his outbursts and his rants are probably due to the loss of his mother.
Mm-hmm.
He's lost his kids. He loves Kim. Well, I can't even really say that, but it looks like he loves Kim. Yeah. So all these things, I think, are just him lashing out. I don't know if he says the stuff that he says if he's in a happy marriage and he's got his kids. I don't know if he says that.
I mean, when we look at the Kim situation as well, men are always more irrational when it comes to love. The women are purely logical when it comes to love, more so. But outside of that, it's the other way around, right? Yeah. So I can see, again, I would agree with you on that, because as a result of losing that, that scale of rationality, it all started going downhill from there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it all started kind of spiraling from there. And now he's losing, again, that sense of control, I would say. It's purely what it comes down to. There's a sense of control that is being lost because, again, by the way, take this with a pinch of salt. I don't know Kanye's reality, but he had, as you said, the idea, as he said himself in an interview, that by having all of that wealth, the power and the means of almost being like a godlike figure, the idea of not losing that and not being able to lose that.
Yeah.
And now that's been completely challenged through marriage, through his relationships, business partnerships. Yeah, it's just sort of an animal trying to fight that's backed into a corner.
Yeah. I want to know what your thoughts are on this, yeah? It's about the idea of control.
Mm.
Do you think that we are more in control when we don't feel the need to control everything?
Absolutely. I'm going to do this in simple terms as possible, but I'm going to go into a bit of quantum physics here. We are electromagnetic beings, right? Equally so as most of the organisms on the planet, like scientifically speaking, molecularly speaking. Do you ever notice that when you stop trying so hard, sometimes the things that you're trying so hard to get suddenly fall into your lap?
Yeah.
On a quantum level, that's because by trying to chase something further, that central force gets further away from you, right? So when you even look at it on a molecular level, right, when you look at two molecular structures, different pieces of matter, when one is ultimately trying to merge with the other, the harder it tries, it suddenly tries to resist it more by embodying that embryo. So it's the same here, right? We're part of the same field. We're made of the same stuff, and this is why I think law of attraction, although has maybe its own merits, is very flawed, because a lot of it is based on, I am constantly striving and goal setting, and manifesting what it is I want, but that in itself can be creating lack. Because if you're looking to get something or achieve something because you feel you don't already have it, that in itself is a position of lack, is it not?
Yeah, I agree.
So, yeah, I would say really when you give up control, which is the art of flow state, which is something I train in, it's being able to understand that you already have everything that you need right there in front of you. And again, that, as we mentioned earlier, that human desire for certainty, when it fundamentally doesn't exist, is what hinders that.
Yeah.
By releasing and surrendering to that's not saying that you've got to sit on your ass and say, okay, well, if I think about it hard enough, I'm just going to get $1 million in my account one day. No, it's the perfect pairing of taking control of what you can as a being, human being, and then accepting that anything else outside of that is a far bigger force than you.
Yeah.
And not trying to control what you can't.
Yeah.
Because through trying to do so, you lose control of what you can.
Yeah. Because I see this in so many, so many like scenarios in like work and in like work, friendships. Like there's that one person that wants to be in control of everything. And what I've noticed about the people that want to control everything is they end up being overwhelmed. So I was like, why is it? So again, going back to the questions, I'm like, why is this person so overwhelmed? Why is this person so overwhelmed? And I'll be like, oh, the person is overwhelmed because this person doesn't trust the people that they're around. So they trust themselves more than they trust other people. So they're going to take everything on themselves. But in doing that, no one can do everything by themselves. No one. So you have to sort of trust the people that you're with in your environment. And in doing that, you are in control because you're giving the person, you're relinquishing the sense of control that you feel that you need to have. And in being able to relinquish that control is controlling itself. It sounds backwards, but I hope it makes sense to the listeners. Like, you wanting to control everything shows a lack of control. There's a word in Greek that is called moderation. Being able to use moderation is a sense of control. Being disciplined is being in control. So someone that's, someone that's gluttonous is a lack of control, but they're doing everything.
Yeah.
So, yeah, just even in regards to like, I'll use this in regards to relationships, yeah? There's no need to be a control freak. There's no need to be a control freak because that control freak, one, is insecure. One, they're insecure. And two, how are you going to get the best out of your partner?
Yeah.
And that's not just relationships that in the romantic sense. That's relationships in regards to like your business partner or your colleague at work. Relationships are general and broad in that way. And yeah, I think my interactions with people have been a bit more productive because I'll let go of that need to control.
Yeah. It's, remember as a kid, right? You're at school and you've got a presentation to do to the class the next day. And you're reciting your lines all night, and then suddenly it gets to the next day and you stood there and you're absolutely bricking it. Maybe you bottle it, or maybe you don't and you do it, but it takes so much effort. The reason why that is because, and this again is a symptom of the shell identity that I talk about. It's a very complex, and you'll hear me mention this a few times, but it's a very complex structure. Lots to it, but this is one of them. and it's the need of thinking about everything constantly, and that part of our mind can only handle so much information, and that's where people try and have the control. And it's within a very limited bandwidth of thought. So like the kid in school, suddenly we even see it on films where they've written a full speech and they've been worrying about how it's going to come out for weeks on end or something, and then ultimately they put it down and they come from the heart or they come from the soul, and they just kill it. That's because suddenly, in a moment, they've given up control. They've given up again of that need of certainty, and then whatever force paired with their mind has delivered everything they need to have.
Yeah.
And within social dynamics, I can admit I used to be one of these individuals where I would take on the weight of the world voluntarily for the sake of constantly needing something to do or to have control over something, because I felt like if I didn't, then I wasn't making progress.
Yeah.
But there is progress in stillness.
Yeah, I agree. And this is one thing that I used to do as well, yeah. I used to do that as well. As in, I have one of my friends I would say he's an introvert. Well, I think he's more comfortable like being to himself. And I used to like probe him, like be like, why are you so shy, man? Like, let's talk to people. Like, then one day we had a conversation and I'm like, you know what? I'm not even going to impose who I want you to be. I'm not going to impose who I want you to be, because you're my friend regardless of who you choose to be. And he's like, you know what? I respect that. Because I think he's been feeling that way, but because he's just so like to himself, he wouldn't even say it.
No.
So I'm just like, yeah, man, just be yourself, man. I accept you. We were talking about the acceptance thing. Just accepting people for who they are just makes things so much smoother.
Do you think it's easier to accept? Sounds like. Do you think it's easier to accept people for who they are when you remove the expectation of who you think they are? I mean, it sounds like an obvious question, but I beg to differ.
I'm not. I would say, yeah. I think you do have to manage your expectations of people, and you do have to remove your expectations. Yeah, 100%. Because when your expectations are too high of yourself and of other people, you're setting yourself up to be disappointed.
Yeah.
Whereas if your expectations are minimal to non-existent, disappointment doesn't affect you as much. I think a lot of my disappointments that I've experienced in my life have come from super high expectations, and I ask myself, why did I expect so much of this person? And a lot of it just comes down to, I expected a lot of them because they're an adult. And I'm thinking, does that logic even make sense? As in, as adults, sure, we expect more from adults than we do, let's say, of children. But to have the same expectations of all adults just because they're adults is flawed, in my view.
Yeah, and I mean, even in the same sentence as well, we mentioned earlier how age isn't always a proprietor of wisdom or intelligence. So it's a paradox in the same sentence of us saying that, and then also maybe the idea that is the case. It's sort of a contradiction to ourselves, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, what would you say, if anything, out of your experience, is one of the easiest ways for people to start understanding others better?
To understand themselves. And I'm not just saying that to be corny, as in I'm genuinely saying that, as in we can all admit that there have been times where we've let ourselves down. And how have you responded to letting yourselves down? Sometimes you're super harsh on yourself. Sometimes you try and brush it off. I think that same sort of patience and understanding needs to be extended to other people. Like, you're my friend. I appreciate you as my friend or whatever, but you're allowed to let me down because I'm not holding you to a perfect standard because that's unfair as a friend.
Yeah.
So you're allowed to let me down. So I think understanding yourself and understanding your imperfections is the best way to manage your expectations of other people. It all starts with self.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree. And even then, through understanding your own limitations, nothing anybody else says to you about those can really, theoretically at least, bother you because there's nothing you don't already know about yourself anyway.
Yeah.
For example, in Clubhouse, you see it all the time, right? There's this, again, people come in with their personas, and then ultimately you ask them enough questions, and suddenly all is revealed, and they turn into this heavily neurotic person that starts projecting.
Yeah.
You go, found you. There's that game of whack-a-mole. But no, in all seriousness, it's the biggest shift, I would say, in the grand scheme is in a world where we constantly look outwards and are taught that everything we seek is beyond this and this. Just looking inwards.
Yeah. Totally. I've got a few questions I want to ask you. Are there any films? Are you a films person?
Yes, love films.
Are there any films that you would recommend to someone to sort of help them improve like their mindset?
I could think of many. But if I were to leave it to 3, I would say 1, and it's a more philosophical one, but it's called The Shack. It's
There's a book on that, isn't it?
yes, yeah.
I've got that book. I need to. Now that you said that, I'm gonna read it because.
Yeah. And it's about this this guy basically that they go on a family trip, and he loses his daughter. His daughter's taken by a killer and ends up being killed. The whole thing. That's all I'll say on it. That's the basic plot. But basically, it's this, he goes on a journey of redemption, and it's actually very tied to the idea of God. Now, it's not a complete preach God religion sort of promo. It's a very spiritual story in itself. But that's what I would recommend from a more philosophical standpoint, meaning of life type stuff. The second I would also recommend is The Pursuit of Happiness. Will Smith. Because it is a way of, it portrays it in a way that isn't this from the bottom to the top stereotypical approach. He experiences the struggles he experiences from the start to the finish, but it's the journey through it that is so profound, because it's not this idealized way of saying, oh, okay, you know, everything climbs up to the top and I've got everything now. It's real. And it's not a glorified version. And then the third, I would have to say, to improve self, last option's always the hardest. I would say is Dallas Buyers Club. Matthew McConaughey.
Okay.
Which is maybe a less popular one. But the story of his scale of achievement, aside from adversity, in that is phenomenal. Guy that's diseased, AIDS, it's about the guy that basically discovered a potential cure for AIDS, and was censored by pharmaceutical companies, government, and so forth, and shut down by it, where he's fighting for his life, and constantly, nevertheless, is in the pursuit of helping others, aside from his own adversities. So each of them, I would say, have their own merits to it, without giving away any spoilers. But yeah, Dallas Buyers Club, Pursuit of Happiness, and The Shack.
Okay, nice. One question I wanted to ask you is, are there any questions that you hoped I would have asked you?
Well, that would require me to have expectation, wouldn't it?
You smart. All right. How would you want to be remembered?
As a human being that had an impact and was able to potentially pass that on. Title doesn't really bother me. You know, what I did to get there. Hopefully, ideally, being reasonably integral and non-tyrannical. But no, in all seriousness, just, you know, how would I be remembered? A human being that did some cool shit and helped lives.
That's it. I think we're gonna wrap up there. Alex, I appreciate you, man. Thank you for coming onto this podcast, man. Appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure being here as well. Long time coming, but we made it.
Yeah, I know. Where can they find you on the social media?
Social media. So one, you can find me on Instagram at theinfinitealex.jp, as well as you can find me on Clubhouse under the name alexander.p.
Okay, cool. What about your businesses?
Yes, so businesses first is More Than Money Global, which is where we focus on the sports betting, cryptocurrency, stocks, modern ways of making money. So that's one way to be able to find and access me and everything I do, find out a little bit more about that. And the other would be the Council for Human Development Association, which is a Swiss association dedicated to the very things we're talking about, humans' potential, and so forth. And you can find those both online as a website.
Oh, all right. You know where to find me. A Matter of Mindset, Joseph Carpe Diem. Signing out.